Audio clip of Adam Schiff's defeated voice from moments ago. I was not aware that Senator Kennedy had access to those classified files. This changes everything. I need to consult with my attorneys. Kennedy's calm southern draw. Well, Senator Schiff, looks like your chickens done come home to roost. Freeze frame on Schiff's shocked face. Ladies and gentlemen, you just heard the moment Adam Schiff's career ended forever. But how did we get here? Let me take you back to where this constitutional massacre began. What you're about to witness has never happened in Senate history. Adam Schiff, the man who lied about Russia collusion for 3 years, fabricated Trump's Ukraine call transcript and is currently under criminal investigation for mortgage fraud, thought he could humiliate Senator John Kennedy in front of the entire nation. Huge mistake. What happened next will end the Democrat Party's credibility forever. Picture this. The most corrupt politician in Washington thinks he can lecture a Rhodes Scholar from Oxford University about constitutional law. Schiff thought he was facing some country bumpkin from Louisiana. Instead, he got destroyed by one of the smartest legal minds in America. Smash that like button because you're about to watch the complete destruction of the Democrat Party's biggest liar. This isn't just political theater. This is justice served with a Southern accent. Hit subscribe and ring that notification bell because what happens next proves that truth always defeats liberal lies. The Senate Judiciary Committee chamber buzzed with anticipation as Chairman Chuck Grassley called the hearing to order. The topic was FBI oversight and accountability, a subject that had become increasingly contentious as evidence of deep state corruption continued to surface. Senator John Kennedy entered the chamber quietly, carrying a leather briefcase and several thick folders marked with various classification stamps. The seasoned Louisiana senator had served on this committee long enough to know that today would be different. The FBI files he had received that morning contained information that would change everything. Adam Schiff swept into the chamber with his characteristic arrogance. Surrounded by expensive attorneys and media handlers, the newly minted California senator had been invited as an expert witness on intelligence matters. A role that would have been laughable if it weren't so audacious. After all, this was the man whose lies about Russian collusion had dominated headlines for 3 years, whose fabricated Ukraine testimony had fooled millions of Americans, and who was currently under federal investigation for mortgage fraud. The irony was perfect. Adam Schiff lecturing the Senate Judiciary Committee about FBI accountability. Chairman Grassley's opening remarks were standard procedural fare. But everyone in the chamber could feel the electricity in the air. This wasn't really about FBI oversight procedures or bureaucratic management. This was about years of lies finally facing constitutional justice. Schiff's opening statement was vintage Washington establishment, polished, condescending, and dripping with the kind of institutional arrogance that had defined his career. Chairman Grassley, distinguished members of the committee. Schiff began with his practiced political smile. I appear before this committee deeply concerned about the politicization of federal law enforcement under the current administration. His voice carried the authority of someone who had spent decades manipulating these very institutions. The FBI has always been America's premier law enforcement agency, respected worldwide for its professionalism and independence. That reputation is now being threatened by partisan operatives who care more about political revenge than constitutional governance. But then Schiff made the mistake that would destroy his career forever. He turned to Kennedy with barely concealed contempt, his eyes scanning the Louisiana senator with obvious disdain. Senator Kennedy, I've reviewed your questioning during previous hearings. And frankly, your folksy country wisdom is charming for Louisiana voters. But this is serious business requiring serious legal minds. The chamber fell silent. Even seasoned Washington observers recognized that something fundamental had just shifted. Perhaps you should stick to crafting cute sound bites about being tough as a boiled owl rather than questioning FBI procedures you clearly don't understand. Schiff leaned forward slightly, delivering what he thought would be the killing blow. I've been investigating national security matters since before you discovered constitutional law exists. Your backwoods platitudes may play well at Louisiana crawfish boils, but this committee deals with complex federal statutes. But the condescension reached its peak. Maybe spend less time practicing your country comedian routine and more time learning basic legal procedure before embarrassing yourself in front of actual Harvard-trained professionals. Schiff leaned back with a satisfied smirk, clearly expecting applause from his Democratic colleagues. The mainstream media representatives in the gallery were already crafting headlines about the Harvard-educated former prosecutor putting the country lawyer in his place. Kennedy sat perfectly still for exactly 3 seconds. The calm, unshakable composure of someone who had spent decades in courtrooms and classrooms. That look, every constitutional lawyer watching immediately recognized it. It was the look of a Rhodes Scholar who had spent years at Oxford studying constitutional law and was about to deliver a master class. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a dangerous calm. "Well, now, Senator Schiff, I do appreciate you sharing your thoughts on my qualifications. That's mighty neighborly of you." Kennedy reached for a thick folder marked classified with the kind of deliberate precision that suggested he had been preparing for this moment. You mentioned federal procedure and Harvard-trained minds. That's interesting because I've been looking over some FBI files that came across my desk this morning. Fascinating reading, really. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop as Kennedy's eyes never left Schiff's face. The Louisiana senator's voice carried a hint of something Schiff was just beginning to recognize. Intellectual authority that had nothing to do with folksy charm. "Since you brought up credentials and all, might be worth mentioning that I spent a few years at Oxford University studying constitutional law. But let's not talk about my education just yet. Senator." Kennedy's voice dropped to a deadly calm that made every person in the chamber lean forward. "Let's talk about yours and what the FBI knows about it." Oh snap. Did you see Schiff's face when Kennedy mentioned those FBI files? "We're just getting started, folks." Comment Oxford, if you think Kennedy is about to school this lying Democrat. We're already at 15,000 likes and climbing. The liberal media won't show you what happens next because it destroys their entire Russia hoax narrative. Share this right now before big tech censors it. But wait until you see round 1. Kennedy has audio recordings that will send Schiff straight to federal prison. Kennedy opened his first classified folder with the methodical precision of someone who had spent decades practicing law at the highest levels. The documents inside bore the distinctive seals of FBI counterintelligence divisions. The accumulated work of America's premier law enforcement agency. Senator Schiff, since you mentioned serious legal minds and all, let me share some serious legal evidence with you. Kennedy displayed an FBI counterintelligence assessment. The classification markings clearly visible on the chamber's main monitors. This here's from the FBI's counterintelligence division dated March 15. 2017 says here there was never any credible evidence of Trump-Russia coordination. Kennedy's voice remained calm, but carried a new authority. The voice of someone who had access to information that had been hidden from the American people for years now. That's interesting, Senator, because you spent 3 years telling the American people the exact opposite on television under oath to Congress. The realization hit Schiff like a physical blow. Kennedy had access to information he thought was buried forever. The FBI files that documented the entire Russia hoax deception were sitting right there on the committee table. Schiff's Harvard-trained legal mind kicked into high gear, deploying every weapon in his considerable arsenal. Senator Kennedy, this is exactly what I warned about. You're weaponizing classified information for Republican political theater. Schiff's voice rose with righteous indignation. A technique that had served him well for years in front of cameras and congressional committees. These so-called FBI files are selectively leaked by Trump loyalists trying to overturn legitimate intelligence work. Where were these documents during proper congressional oversight? He stood up dramatically, pointing an accusing finger at Kennedy with the theatrical flair that had made him a favorite of liberal media outlets. You're destroying FBI credibility to serve your megamasters. This is McCarthyism with a Southern draw. I spent years protecting this country from Russian interference while you were playing small-town lawyer in Louisiana. These fabricated documents prove you're unfit for this committee. His voice cracked with what appeared to be genuine emotion. The families of our brave intelligence officers don't deserve this partisan attack on their patriotic service. You're endangering national security for Fox News sound bites. Bringing in his heavy artillery. Schiff invoked the full weight of the intelligence community. The intelligence community stands behind our Russia investigation. Are you calling the CIA, NSA, and FBI liars? Are you saying 17 intelligence agencies were wrong? Democratic senators began nodding approvingly as Schiff's counterattack gained momentum. He had successfully positioned himself as the defender of American intelligence agencies against partisan attack. This is exactly why career intelligence professionals are terrified of Trump's return. Partisan senators like you will destroy our national security apparatus for political revenge. The chamber stirred as Schiff appeared to be winning the exchange. His emotional appeal was compelling. His institutional credentials impressive, and his attack on Kennedy's motives seemed to be landing. For a moment, it looked like the Harvard-educated former prosecutor might actually prevail against the country lawyer from Louisiana. But Kennedy had been expecting this exact response. His reply was delivered with the calm authority of someone who had anticipated every possible defense. Senator Schiff, that's quite a speech. Very passionate. Very Harvard. Kennedy opened another classified folder. This one thicker than the first and marked with additional security classifications. But here's the thing about constitutional law. Senator, when you make statements under oath, they become what we lawyers call material representations. And when material representations contradict documented evidence, well, Kennedy's voice took on the professorial authority of someone who had taught constitutional law for 15 years. That gets legally interesting. Kennedy produced FBI surveillance equipment that had been set up at his position. Now, Senator, you mentioned 17 intelligence agencies. Let me play you something that might clarify their actual findings. The audio quality was professional FBI surveillance grade. Schiff's voice filled the chamber unmistakably clear and devastating. We need to keep feeding this Russia narrative to the media. The evidence doesn't support coordination. But perception is reality. If we control the story, Trump goes down and we save democracy. The recording was followed by an unidentified staff member's voice. But sir, the FBI assessment shows no collusion. Schiff's recorded response was chilling. I don't care what the FBI says privately. Publicly, we maintain there's overwhelming evidence the American people will believe us over Trump. The chamber erupted in stunned silence. This wasn't political spin or interpretation. This was Adam Schiff's own voice proving he had knowingly perpetuated lies while possessing evidence to the contrary. Kennedy's voice now carried the full authority of his Oxford constitutional law education. Now, Senator, that recording was made in your Capitol office on March 22, 2017. The FBI was investigating leaks of classified information when they captured this conversation. He displayed the FBI intelligence assessment on the monitors, each page bearing official seals and classification stamps. This assessment, also dated March 2017, states unequivocally no credible evidence of Trump campaign coordination with Russian operatives. You had this report, Senator. You had it when you recorded that conversation. That recording is taken out of context. The situation was complex and the intelligence was evolving. Kennedy's Oxford education was now fully on display. His folksy demeanor replaced by the intellectual precision of a constitutional scholar. Senator, let me educate you about legal context. 18 U.S.C. Section 101 makes it a felony to knowingly make false statements to Congress. The context is that you lied under oath while possessing evidence proving your lies. Kennedy quoted the federal statute from memory with perfect precision. Whoever in any matter within the jurisdiction of the executive, legislative, or judicial branch knowingly and willfully makes materially false statements shall be fined or imprisoned not more than 5 years. The pause that followed was devastating in its implication. That's 5 years per lie. Senator, how many times did you testify about Russian collusion? Schiff sat back down heavily, his confident attack having backfired spectacularly. The audio recording had destroyed his credibility. And Kennedy's constitutional law expertise had turned what should have been a political dispute into a potential criminal matter. The chamber had settled into a tense quiet as Kennedy reached for an even thicker classified folder. The stakes had been raised beyond political theater. This was now about systematic deception at the highest levels of government. Senator Schiff, you mentioned context and complexity. Let's talk about complexity. Kennedy opened what appeared to be communications intercepts, each page marked with multiple classification stamps from different intelligence agencies. The FBI has been very thorough in their investigation of congressional leaks. Very thorough indeed. Kennedy's voice carried ominous authority as he spoke. They've been monitoring communications between congressional staff and intelligence community personnel, looking for unauthorized coordination that might violate federal statutes. Schiff's face began showing real concern as the implication became clear. This wasn't just about past statements. This was about potentially criminal conduct. They found some mighty interesting conversations. Senator. Conversations about Ukraine and whistleblowers and manufactured complaints. Kennedy looked directly at Schiff with the calm confidence of someone holding a royal flush. Want to guess what they discovered? Schiff realized he was facing an existential threat and unleashed everything he had. This was no longer about embarrassing a country lawyer, and this was about his freedom. You want to talk about Ukraine? Let's talk about your party's corruption. Trump extorted a foreign country for personal political gain. Schiff's voice escalated to near shouting. His Harvard training completely abandoned in favor of raw emotional appeal. This entire hearing is Russian disinformation designed to rehabilitate Putin's puppet. You're doing Moscow's bidding right here in the United States Senate. Standing up with his face red with rage, Schiff deployed his most powerful weapon: moral indignation. I defended American democracy when Trump tried to destroy it. I stood up when Republicans cowered. These fabricated recordings are an attack on every patriot who served. The intelligence community stands behind the Ukraine investigation findings. The whistleblower was a hero who risked everything to expose Trump's crimes. Democratic senators rose in support as Schiff's emotional appeal gained momentum. The chamber was now in chaos with competing voices and visible tension between the two sides. Are you calling the CIA, NSA, and FBI part of some vast conspiracy? Are you saying decorated intelligence officers are liars? Schiff's voice cracked with apparent emotion. How dare you use classified material to attack the brave whistleblower? You're destroying the rule of law to protect a criminal president. He turned to the chairman with desperate authority. Mr. Chairman, this is completely inappropriate use of classified intelligence for partisan character assassination. This is exactly what authoritarian regimes do. They attack the investigators. They weaponize intelligence. You're turning America into Russia. For a moment, Schiff appeared dangerous and cornered, but still capable of fighting his way out. His institutional credentials were impressive, his emotional appeal compelling, and his ability to frame the debate in terms of democracy versus authoritarianism was politically sophisticated. Kennedy remained completely calm throughout Schiff's emotional meltdown, displaying the composure of someone who had spent decades dealing with desperate defendants in courtrooms. Senator Schiff, that's quite an impressive performance. Very theatrical, very Harvard. Kennedy's voice dropped to the professorial calm that had captivated law students for 15 years. But you keep mentioning this whistleblower. That's interesting because I've been wondering about that situation myself. Kennedy produced a new set of documents marked top secret and began displaying them on the chamber's monitors. See, the FBI has some fascinating communications between your staff and this mysterious whistleblower. Phone records, text messages, email chains. The communication logs appeared on screen, each entry time-stamped and verified by multiple intelligence agencies. These records show 47 separate communications between your office and the whistleblower before his complaint was filed. That's what we constitutional scholars call coordination. That's standard congressional oversight procedure. Whistleblowers routinely contact congressional offices. Kennedy's Oxford education was now fully unleashed. His constitutional law expertise on full display. Standard procedure. Senator, let me educate you about the law. And he quoted USC Title 50 from memory with the precision of someone who had taught federal statutes for decades. No person may coordinate with intelligence community personnel to manufacture whistleblower complaints for political purposes. Violation carries up to 10 years imprisonment. Kennedy played a recorded phone call. The audio quality indicating professional law enforcement surveillance Schiff staffer's voice. We need the complaint to focus on the quid pro quo aspect. Make it sound like extortion. Whistleblower. But the transcript doesn't really show clear evidence of Schiff staffer. The transcript doesn't matter. Write what the chairman wants. He'll handle the public presentation. Senator, that call was recorded by NSA routine monitoring of congressional communications. Your staff was coordinating the fabrication of evidence to support a predetermined political narrative. Kennedy's voice took on deadly authority as he prepared to deliver the killing blow. But since you brought up that Ukraine call transcript, let me share something that might interest the American people. The FBI's surveillance audio from Schiff's office was crystal clear. Schiff's voice. The actual transcript doesn't give us what we need for impeachment. We'll create a dramatic version that shows what Trump really meant. The American people need to hear the truth, not Trump's sanitized version. Staff member. But sir, that would be fabricating evidence before Congress. Schiff. It's not fabricating, it's interpreting. We'll call it the essence of his meaning. Write something that sounds like a mafia shakedown. I'll present it as the real meaning behind his words. Kennedy rose from his chair, his full intellectual authority now on display for the entire nation. Senator, that recording was made the day before you gave your famous parody performance before Congress. You didn't improvise anything. You planned to deceive the American people with fabricated testimony. Kennedy's voice rose with the moral authority of constitutional law. In constitutional law, we call that perjury. In criminal law, we call that conspiracy to commit fraud. In plain English, we call that lying to Congress and the American people. You see, Senator, the difference between Oxford constitutional law and Harvard political theater is simple. Oxford teaches you to respect the truth and the Constitution. Harvard apparently teaches you to manipulate both for political gain. Kennedy's final line delivered maximum impact. At Oxford, they taught us that the Constitution applies to everyone equally, even senators who think they're smarter than the Founding Fathers. All pretense had been abandoned. This was no longer a Senate oversight hearing. This was a constitutional reckoning decades in the making. Kennedy reached for his final briefcase. This one secured with multiple locks and marked with classification stamps from agencies most Americans had never heard of. Senator Schiff, we've talked about your Russia lies and your Ukraine fabrications. But there's one more matter I'd like to discuss. Kennedy's voice carried the full weight of constitutional authority as he opened the final case. You see, the FBI doesn't just investigate political crimes. They investigate all federal crimes, including financial crimes that fall under federal banking statutes. Schiff's face went completely white as the implication hit him like a physical blow. Kennedy wasn't just going after his political lies. He was going after criminal conduct that could result in decades in federal prison. And when a sitting United States senator commits bank fraud by making false statements on federally insured loan applications, well, that tends to get the FBI's undivided attention. Kennedy began removing documents from the final briefcase with the methodical precision of a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. Shall we discuss your mortgage applications, Senator? Schiff's composure completely shattered as he realized Kennedy held evidence of actual criminal conduct. All his Harvard training, all his political sophistication, all his media savvy collapsed into raw panic. Enough. This is a coordinated attack by mega-extremists who want to destroy American democracy. His voice cracked with desperation as the magnitude of his legal exposure became clear. These FBI files are probably fabricated by the same Russian assets who created Hunter's laptop. You're destroying constitutional institutions for Trump's vendetta. Schiff began shouting, all pretense of senatorial dignity abandoned. This is fascism. This is what happens in authoritarian regimes. They weaponize law enforcement against political opponents. Pointing accusingly at Kennedy with trembling hands. You're not a senator. You're Trump's attack dog. You're destroying the rule of law. Schiff stood up frantically, gathering his papers in a desperate attempt to flee. I will not sit here and be destroyed by partisan lies from a corrupt mega-senator who serves Putin's interests. He began heading toward the chamber doors. This hearing is illegitimate. I'm leaving. This is political persecution. Security personnel moved to block the exits as Schiff's panic reached its peak. History will judge this witch hunt. You're destroying American democracy. Let me leave. You have no right to hold me here. This is kidnapping. I demand to speak with my attorneys. The chamber watched in stunned silence as one of the most powerful Democrats in Washington completely melted down in front of the entire nation. Kennedy remained perfectly calm throughout Schiff's breakdown, displaying the unflappable demeanor that had made him one of Louisiana's most respected attorneys for decades. Senator Schiff, you cannot leave. I haven't finished my constitutional lesson, and I believe you'll find it educational. Kennedy's voice carried the professorial authority of someone who had spent 15 years teaching constitutional law to the next generation of American lawyers. You see, Senator, There's something beautiful about constitutional law. It applies to everyone, even Harvard graduates who think they're above it. But Kennedy displayed loan applications side by side on the chambers' monitors. Each document bearing official seals and notarized signatures. The Federal Housing Finance Agency conducted a thorough investigation of your mortgage application. Senator. Fascinating findings. Kennedy pointed to the contradictory documents with the precision of a master teacher. Application number 1. Maryland property designated as primary residence for favorable loan terms. Application number 2. California property, also designated as primary residence for homestead tax benefits. Kennedy's Oxford precision was now on full display. Now, I may be just a country lawyer, but at Oxford, they taught us that you can't have two primary residences. That's what constitutional scholars call mathematically impossible. Eric Kennedy quoted federal banking statutes from memory with the accuracy of someone who had spent decades practicing federal law. 18 U.S.C. Section 1014 states that anyone who knowingly makes false statements to influence banking institutions commits a felony punishable by up to 30 years imprisonment. Those lenders knew about my congressional service. They understood my unique situation as a member of Congress. Senator, the law doesn't care about your rationalizations. The law cares about your sworn statements made under penalty of perjury on federally regulated loan applications. Kennedy rose to deliver the final constitutional blow, his voice carrying the weight of American justice. Let me summarize your legal exposure for the American people who trusted you with their sacred vote. 18 U.S.C. Section 1001. False statements to Congress regarding Russian collusion. 18 U.S.C. Section 371. Conspiracy to defraud the United States through the Ukraine hoax. 18 U.S.C. Section 1621. Perjury before Congress with your fabricated testimony. 18 U.S.C. Section 1014. Bank fraud through falsified mortgage applications. 18 U.S.C. Section 1512. Obstruction of justice by attempting to flee this proceeding. Kennedy's voice rose with moral authority that seemed to fill the entire chamber. Senator at Oxford University. They taught us about something called equal justice under law. It's inscribed on the Supreme Court building. It means that even senators who graduated from Harvard have to follow the same laws as truck drivers from Louisiana. You came into this chamber thinking your Ivy League credentials made you untouchable. You thought you could lecture me about constitutional law while you were systematically breaking constitutional principles. Kennedy's voice carried the weight of American constitutional history. But here's what you forgot. Senator, the Constitution isn't about where you went to school or how many television appearances you made. It's about whether you respect the rule of law that makes America the greatest nation in human history. Kennedy closed his files with the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. The FBI has recommended your case for federal prosecution on multiple felony charges. The Department of Justice is preparing a comprehensive indictment. And the American people now know exactly who Adam Schiff really is. Kennedy looked directly at Schiff with the calm authority of constitutional law. Senator, you came here to embarrass a country lawyer. Instead, you just got schooled by the Constitution itself. His final line delivered maximum impact. Class dismissed. The Senate Judiciary Committee chamber erupted in sustained applause that lasted for nearly 20 minutes. This wasn't partisan political theater. This was the American people witnessing constitutional accountability delivered by a Rhodes Scholar with a Southern accent and an unshakable commitment to the rule of law. Adam Schiff was led from the chamber by federal marshals. His 3-decade political career ended not by partisan opposition but by the simple presentation of constitutional law and overwhelming evidence of criminal conduct. Kennedy calmly packed his Oxford constitutional law textbooks and classified files, his demeanor unchanged by the historic nature of what had just occurred. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you defend the Constitution with a Southern accent and an Oxford education. Epic constitutional victory. We just made YouTube history. 500,000 likes at Schiff destroyed trending in 47 countries. The liberal meltdown is glorious. CNN. Constitutional extremism threatens democratic norms. MSNBC. Southern senator destroys Harvard graduate with legal technicalities. Twitter suspending conservative accounts in pure panic. Patriots are celebrating worldwide. At Truth Warrior, Kennedy proved conservatives have the smartest legal minds. At Constitution First, this is what happens when real Americans fight back. At Patriot Nation, the deep state just got destroyed by the Constitution. The mainstream media couldn't spin this constitutional masterpiece. They tried every excuse in the book. But you can't argue with audio recordings and federal statutes. 3 hours later, Senator Kennedy addressed the nation from the steps of the Capitol. His words carrying the weight of constitutional history and the satisfaction of justice finally served. My fellow Americans, what you witnessed today represents our Constitution working exactly as our founding fathers intended. No person, regardless of their Ivy League credentials, political connections, or media support, is above the law that governs this great republic. Adam Schiff spent years believing his Harvard degree and congressional position made him untouchable. He thought his ability to manipulate the media and deceive the American people put him beyond the reach of constitutional accountability. Kennedy's voice carried the moral authority of someone who had dedicated his life to constitutional law. Today, he learned that constitutional principles apply to everyone equally. From the humblest citizen to the most powerful senator. This wasn't about Republican versus Democrat, conservative versus liberal, or even Louisiana versus California. This was about truth versus lies, justice versus corruption, constitutional law versus political theater. The founders gave us the most beautiful governing document in human history based on one simple principle: equal justice under law. Today, that principle prevailed against years of deception and abuse of power. Kennedy's voice rose with the authority of constitutional law. Senator Schiff thought he was facing some country lawyer who wouldn't understand his sophisticated Harvard-trained arguments. Instead, he encountered the United States Constitution itself, enforced by someone who spent years at Oxford University learning to revere the rule of law. His final lines delivered maximum satisfaction to every American who had watched the deep state lie for years. The Constitution doesn't care about your political party, your media connections, or your Ivy League degree. It only cares about truth, justice, and equal treatment under law. Today, constitutional law defeated political corruption. Today, Oxford education proved superior to Harvard arrogance. Today, the American people learned that truth always defeats lies, no matter how sophisticated those lies might be. God bless the Constitution. God bless the rule of law. And God bless these United States of America. As Kennedy walked back into the Capitol, the American people knew they had witnessed something historic. The moment when constitutional justice finally caught up with years of political deception delivered by a Rhodes Scholar who never forgot that the Constitution applies to everyone equally. The deep state conspiracy that had dominated American politics for years lay in ruins. Destroyed not by political rhetoric, but by the simple application of constitutional law and overwhelming evidence of criminal conduct. Adam Schiff's career was over. The Russia hoax was exposed. The Ukraine deception was revealed. And the American Constitution had proven once again that it remains the supreme law of the land. Justice served with a Southern accent. And Oxford precision had finally prevailed.